Who are you?
I'm your worst nightmare.
Spiders? You're spiders?
We work together very well.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Critically Acclaimed, the podcast where highbrow and lowbrow collide.
Not the face! Ah! Well, so much from a face. Who the hell are you?
I the hell am William Bibbiani. I'm a film critic for the internet. Everybody calls me Bibbs.
My name is Witney Seibold. I, too, am a film critic for the internet, and in fact... film critic for a brand new website.
That's right.
We got something to shamelessly plug here.
That's right. In addition to the work we do for sites like IGN and The Wrap, Witney Seibold and I have decided to start our own website. It is called criticallyacclaimed.net. .com was taken. Mm-hmm. No one's using it, but it was taken.
Well, it's called Critically Acclaimed. It is at criticallyacclaimed.net.
Yes, www.criticallyacclaimed.net. That's where you can find all of our podcasts from different places throughout the internet, all of our appearances from here on out, exclusive new reviews and articles and retrospectives.
We made a hub. Essentially, of all of the stuff we contribute to everything in the internet, but we also wanted a place to write about whatever the hell we wanted to write about.
Yeah, because we're freelance writers right now, and that means we have to run everything we want to do by other publications, which is fine. That's how it works. But there's stuff we want to write that they don't have the budget for, or they don't think people will be interested in, and we just want to write it. So this is going to be a place for movie reviews of new and old movies. I'm going to do a new series there called The Beginner's Guide. I get a lot of questions from young film fans about where to start with their film fandom. I don't know enough about film noir. Where do I start? I'm going to give you a whole series of articles about that. Whitney, I want you to contribute a few of those for stuff you know better than I do.
I would be happy to.
We have a new series every week.
Somebody asked me about French noir. Ooh. Somebody asked me about French heist movies.
We have a new series every week, every Friday. It's called Double Features, in which we do kind of what we do on this program, but we take new release movies and we each pick the perfect double feature for them, our own choice for it, to put those films in their sort of artistic and historical contexts. So, like, a film like Action Point is coming out next week. What would be the perfect double feature for Action Point?
I don't know. We'll think of something.
I haven't seen it yet. We haven't said. But this week, for example, we're doing Mary Shelley, and we both picked films about the artist's experience, about artists' personal lives, and sort of hedonism, I think, in a lot of ways.
Your pick.
My pick was about hedonism. Your pick was about not hedonism. You can head over to criticallyacclaimed.net and read that. My written review of Solo: A Star Wars Story is there. You put up a great essay about lessons we can still learn from Roger Ebert.
That's right.
All of those things are exclusive to criticallyacclaimed.net. And in addition to that, we are adding some critically acclaimed perks to our Patreon page. Whitney and I have a Patreon page for our other podcast, Canceled Too Soon, where we review television series lasted one season or less. There are exclusive podcasts there. And now for the $10 a month tier, people who contribute to our Patreon get to assign us 2 articles a year. For me or Witney Seibold. These can be reviews of movies, top 10 lists, essays on topics if you want. A few limitations apply. It can't be an article we recently published somewhere else, for example.
Yeah.
And you can't force us to espouse an opinion we don't have.
Yeah.
But you can force us to look at a film from a certain perspective, for example, and then give our honest opinion on that. But we can't lie, and we can't, like...
We're critics. Lying ain't our bag.
No, that's the opposite of what we do. That's the point. We have to be honest about our opinions. So we got that, and we have a bonus podcast over there that's more for movie lovers, where called Only the Best, where Whitney and I are going to review every nominee for Best Picture ever in chronological order, starting at the beginning of the awards.
Yep.
It's a hell of a lot of content over there, and there's other bonus content there as well. So head over to patreon.com/canceled too soon. That's cancel with 1 L, and you can make us write whatever you want. You can be our editors, basically, over at criticallyacclaimed.net. Might be fun.
Why the heck not?
I look forward to finding out what people want us to write about. I think it's really exciting.
I'm eager to see. I'm eager to see what you guys are watching and what you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about it too. So let us know.
Absolutely.
In the meantime,
we do have this podcast.
For completely free, you get to listen to us right now. And we do more than just plug our own stuff.
That's right. It's a brand new thing. We had to plug it.
We had to get a plug right out of the way.
All right. But this week on the show, we are reviewing a bunch of new releases. We're reviewing Solo, a Star Wars story. We're reviewing the biopic Mary Shelley, which we just talked about a little bit. We're reviewing How to Talk to Girls at Parties, and was it In Darkness?
In Darkness.
And I want to talk a little bit about the new mini-series remake of Picnic at Hanging Rock. And,
is that available already?
Yeah, it's on Amazon today.
Oh,
or
today.
Or yesterday as we reviewed
it. Well, rats, I missed it. I wish I could have talked about it.
It's still there.
Because I love the Peter Weir film, and I wanted to compare the two.
We could talk a little bit about the Peter Weir film. And then also, because, every week we review something that people on the Schmoville Facebook page ask us to do via poll. It's the last week of the month, and we are reviewing every Rambo movie. You wanted the Rambo movies, you got the Rambo movie. So it's a long one, and we really got to get started.
There's one really great Rambo movie.
1.5.
1.5 good Rambo movies.
All right, we'll talk about those at the end of the episode. But now, let's start with Solo, a Star Wars story.
Solo, a Star Wars story.
And now here's the deal. We're not going to go into heavy spoilers on this. We might talk about the plot in a sort of a general way. We might tell you about a few incidents throughout the film. But generally speaking, we're going to be pretty respectful. But also, because this is a Han Solo prequel,
there's not a lot you can spoil about this one. And honestly,
that's one of the things about this movie. This movie is very much like a Mad Libs. This is just sort of filling in how he got where he went. It's fill in the blank movie. Like, how did he get the Millennium Falcon? Boom. How did he meet Chewbacca? Boom.
Now,
that's the whole movie.
Yeah, I've seen all the Star Wars movies to date. Yes, all of them. All 14 of them, which a lot of people don't like to mention the TV movies or even the animated film. They all count. I've seen them all. And it wasn't until I saw The Last Jedi that I really took notice of, like, the lucky dice that I guess Han Solo hung on his rearview mirror in his spaceship. Were those present all throughout and I just missed them, or was it only brought up in The Last Jedi?
I think they were there, but no one gave a shit.
Okay.
I could be wrong about this. I can look this up if you want, but...
Because that's these like lucky dice that he had, like we get to see like how he has them, how long he's had them. They're a little bit more like a presence in his life, and I didn't think that was part of like the character or his myth or significant in any sort of way. Now I know Star Wars.
Apparently, they were in A New Hope. They were not treated like something important, but they were there.
They were just there. All right. The problem with this new wave of Star Wars movies is that they're specifically designed for the people who have watched Star Wars 100 times and have noticed and embellished and assigned a lot of importance to little tiny incidental details that actually aren't significant to sort of the greater workings of the Star Wars story.
Yeah.
So, like, Han Solo's jacket is now really iconic, and it's important to know how he got his jacket. It's just his jacket. I don't care how he got his jacket.
The movies that did this that pissed me off even more than the way Star Wars is doing it, because we've seen this before. Like The Good and the Bad, the Ugly has this. We find out how Clint Eastwood got his poncho. It's not important. They don't treat it like a big plot point. It's, and then he grabbed that. Fine. In the Pirates of the Caribbean sequels, the first two sequels, they treated every incidental, fun side detail in the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie as if it was really fucking important, and guess what? It was not. Yeah. Even like the bauble hanging from Jack Sparrow's hair, turns out that was super important. Why? Because... Like we don't. Like this, it can just a cigar can just be a cigar. It doesn't have to be a big deal.
Well, and you know now we're in this part of we're seeing all of these Star Wars prequels, and they've announced them. We're also going to get a prequel with Boba Fett as the lead character, Obi-Wan as and there's this weird sort of fatalistic bent now to everything. Like everything happens for a very specific reason because it has to lead towards Star Wars.
Yeah.
We'll get to how aggravating that is a little bit later on. But for now, we're going to stay with Han Solo and. We have this fatalistic approach. Han Solo is going to go to where he goes. Okay, Han Solo is an interesting character.
like Han Solo.
He's energetic. He's the most interesting thing about the first Star Wars movie. He's the most energetic character. He's the character you kind of gravitate toward because he's the funniest and he's the most human.
He's the one who isn't taking everything super seriously.
Yeah.
It's not his story. He's along for the ride, and as a result...
He cares less about the outcome of these events.
And he gets to be a bit more aloof. He gets to be a bit more laid back and cool. And we like him for that.
Yeah.
And he's played by Harrison Ford, who was never more charming than he was as Han Solo in the first Star Wars in particular. Maybe Empire. Like those two in particular. Never more charming.
Now we're having the young Adventures of Han Solo. He's been recast by Alden Ehrenreich, who is quite a good actor, actually.
I'm a big fan.
He was really good in Hail Caesar.
Hail Caesar's great. I'm a big fan of Beautiful Creatures, which is one of the YA movies that didn't take off, but it's really quite good.
There's a scene where Alden Ehrenreich is like paralyzed by magic and is forced to attend this like completely bonkers dinner where people walk around with like peacocks under their arms.
It is Margot Martindale with a peacock.
Margot Martindale carries around a peacock, and Jeffrey Irons has this weird southern accent and wears like these giant like hanging silk robes that drag behind him.
It is delightfully eccentric.
It's
I like
just
that movie.
such a strange movie.
Alden Ehrenreich, I will give him credit. I can tell there are times when he's trying to deliver his lines a little bit like Harrison Ford, but he is not playing Harrison Ford. Yeah. It's like they have, like, we're watching a new version of Hamlet, and Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet is different from Ethan Hawke's Hamlet or whoever. This is Han Solo, but it's Alden Ehrenreich's Solo. And
of Han Solo.
You know what? I'm fine with it. I like him a lot. I think he's very charming. I say charming a lot. That's Han Solo. He's a charming cat.
He's a charming guy. But the thing about Han Solo is, like you said, he's a supporting character. He has no stakes in the outcome of this grand conflict that's going on in the Star Wars universe. So,
well, everyone has a stake because it's the whole universe, but it's not his personal... He's not his father out there, you know?
Like, right. And this Solo movie does try to fold in a little bit of stakes, but for the most part, he shouldn't really care. So knowing about Han Solo's backstory isn't significant to Star Wars.
You know, here's my thing with Han Solo and Rogue One. They both answer questions no one asked.
Yeah.
I mean, we might be curious about the adventures of young Han Solo, but here's my thing. If it was that interesting, it would have been in the movies. Like, how do we get the Death Star plans? I don't know, there was a fucking mission. Like, and you can make it a big story all you want, but now that it's a foregone conclusion, like everyone's talking about, like, the end of Rogue One, how tragic is it? Well, it was a foregone conclusion. We never saw those characters again, so we know what happened to them. It's obvious. Yeah. It might be kind of interesting. I think Rogue One is okay, but, like, it's not that great. Han Solo...
I really hated Rogue One. I was made angry by Rogue One.
I didn't hate it. I think it's a fun action movie, but as a Star Wars movie, it's really disposable, no matter how heavy they try to make the drama, because, again, it's a fill-in-the-blank movie. It can't have greater consequence than we've already seen. Han Solo is the same way.
At best, it's a footnote that might embellish a certain detail of a film you already know, but it does not succeed on the merits that it has.
And I'm not saying...
Also, in terms of Rogue One, the characters are really dull.
They're very broadly brushed at best.
Yeah. There's not a lot of depth. They're not bringing a sort of richness to the mission that I think the story maybe intended. And ultimately, when you see that it was just all about the mission and it wasn't about the characters, you see how disposable they really were from the start.
Yeah, they were a character card. They were an index card with a character trait. Cool guy with force. Boom. Done.
This new Han Solo movie does the same thing just with the Han Solo character. It's just footnote stuff to a more interesting version of the character that we were going to get later on.
Absolutely. And it, like Rogue One, is also a heist movie. Han Solo performs a series of heists over the course of this film. I'm not against that. I like heist movies.
Also with a comic relief robot.
Yep. And here's the thing. I appreciate that it's a lighter Star Wars movie, because Last Jedi was heavy as hell. Rogue One, it's a downer. If you do attach yourself to those characters, it's a downer. And Force Awakens was an emotional roller coaster by the end as well. Characters die who we loved. And here's a light and fluffy one, and I'm fine with that. That's not inherently a problem. It's just, I'm actually of the opinion it wasn't light and fluffy enough. Because when you look at the construct of this movie and how many times the origin of Han Solo and every little tiny thing we know about Han Solo is treated like is built up like a joke. Every single thing From the Millennium Falcon to the card game with Lando Calrissian,
So there's a line-
to meeting Chewbacca, like all of them are self-aware jokes. The audience knows where we're going. Ha. Get it? I get why they originally got Lord and Miller, the guys behind the Lego Movie and 21 Jump Street,
because
to do this.
they were going to kind of spoof it up a little bit.
I can only imagine because it's a very knowing screenplay. You look at in
there
particular,
are certain self-aware lines of dialogue throughout. Actually,
a few, and I think you can see the residual of this in particular with Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian. Lando Calrissian in this, he's a funny character. He's a comedy character. There's a bit. This isn't a spoiler. It's just a dumb joke. There's a bit where they end up in Lando's closet, and he has nothing but capes.
He has a cape closet.
That's a comedy character. That is a self-aware joke about Lando Calrissian. He wouldn't have nothing but capes. That's a comedy bit. But they got Ron Howard to massively reshoot and finish the movie, and I get Ron Howard's sort of vibe from this, because here's the thing with Ron Howard. First off, no slight to Ron Howard. I like Ron Howard as a director. He's made some bad movies. He's made a lot of really good movies. I like a lot of Ron Howard.
Yeah.
The majority of Ron Howard movies, I would say, I like or love. I think he's really talented.
He's batting more than 50-50.
Absolutely. He is insanely sincere. He doesn't make self-aware movies. He makes very genuine movies. The one time he tried to do something with a knowing wink was The Grinch, and it's a piece of crap. He doesn't do that. He treats it really serious.
I would say Ed TV is his one sort of kind of self-aware, winky success.
Maybe, but you look at everything else.
The Grinch is a pile of garbage.
But you look at where he is in his career. He's making films like Rush and Frost Nixon and the Angels and Demons movies, which have no concept of how insane they are. He's a very sincere filmmaker, and I get that. You look at Willow. I like Willow a lot. Willow is a fantasy movie he made for Lucasfilm in the 80s, and it's got a total Star Wars vibe.
It's the same story, the same types of characters. Yeah, there's really kind of a...
You set that in outer space, that's a good Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. But here, the material is so on the nose and ridiculous in its construct. And it is presented, his tone of it.
As if we're supposed to take it totally seriously.
We're supposed to take it seriously. Yeah, there are jokes, but I don't think he's treating this like it's the most important story. This is the least important story. This is fluff, and you're treating it like it's a big fucking deal. And there's a disconnect there that just makes me look at the film and just go, oh,
yeah,
that's okay. I don't hate this movie. It just doesn't work.
I mean, Star Wars stock and trade has always been kind of earnestness, and it's rare that they can spin away from that. And
if you're going to do it, it's Han Solo. He's the one who was aloof.
I get there are other sort of comic characters. Like if Lord and Miller were to make a comically earnest film about, say, Jar Jar Binks, like a really hated Star Wars character.
Oh my god, I can't even imagine what that would look like.
And it's like the origin story, and it turns out like he had to throw his father into a volcano to gain his, some like a really kind of epically tragic backstory to Jar Jar Binks. That kind of earnestness would play like as comedy, and that would be okay.
Yeah, fair enough. All I can picture is Jar Jar throwing his father.
Yeah, I don't know, just something off the top of my head. Had to sacrifice one planet of his people just so he could stay alive.
Jesus Christ!
He had the Force, but he lost it, and like his mind is scrambled, and that's why he behaves the way he does.
Oh my god!
It's just something completely idiotic. That would be really fun. They started trying to have fun. They hired Lord and Miller. They're fun. Han Solo, he's fun. They wanted to do something that was actually enjoyable to watch, and they got afraid that fans wouldn't be able to, strangely enough, have fun with Star Wars.
Well, I don't want to throw it out there. We're intuiting a lot of this. This is partly based on what they actually just said. They were doing the wrong tone. They were making it too jokey. But
given the decisions that they made, they hired somebody kind of fun, and then they went with somebody a lot more earnest. And given the result, a very earnest film, my guess is they got a little gun shy with the series.
Especially considering how jokey the script is.
There was a character in it named, I think, like Supra Lobster Punch or something. There was a gigantic lobster character, and they decided like Kane Lobster Punch. They gave him some sort of...
God, that's funny.
It's a Star Wars name, but it's a silly Star Wars name. Clearly, they started to steer the camera a little bit too far away from Star Wars.
There are pre-existing Star Wars characters with silly names.
Yeah.
You might remember the drug dealer from Attack of the Clones. His last name was Sleazebagano.
Was it really?
Yes, it was like Elon Sleazebagano or something. I might be getting the first name wrong.
The character name like Kit Fisto. That's like an actual Star Wars name.
Yeah, I always took. Everyone's talking about Star Wars. It's so everyone felt welcome in Star Wars. You know who wasn't welcome in Star Wars? The fat guy, because you named the fat guy in New Hope Porkins and then kill him off. He's a bad fat guy joke, and then he dies immediately.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there as a chubby kid going, "Well, I'm not welcome here. What the?
Okay,
this sucks." Like
Twinkie Farts Porkins or whatever his name was. Yeah.
Jack Porkins.
Oh, it was Jack Porkins.
Jack.
Like Jack Perkins, maybe.
Jack Porkins.
Like J-E-K. Jack.
Yeah.
All right, fine.
I'm pretty sure it's Jack. I'm going to look that up. Yeah.
I don't care.
My point is that a lot of these things that people don't like about Star Wars, they're kind of there. I was having this conversation with someone online, and they were talking about how, like, oh my god, all of these new Star Wars movies, like episode 7 and 8, it's just killing off people from the previous trilogy. And I'm like,
good.
But I'm not about screw good. That's precedent. The episodes 4 through 6 just killed off every surviving member of the prequel trilogy.
Yeah, I suppose so.
You got Obi-Wan, Yoda, Darth Vader, Palpatine, Boba Fett. They all fucking die. Like, and if you did a prequel trilogy to the prequel trilogy, who would be the main characters? Probably Mace Windu and Qui-Gon Jinn. Like,
the ones who all die.
It's a generational story in generations. Like, a lot of the things we get mad about, I think we forget that they're always in there.
Yeah.
So, like, a lot of the dumb jokes, they were always in there.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, we're dealing with something that was meant to be silly, ends up very earnest, and ends up being neither fish nor fowl. Yeah. And it becomes really ineffectual and kind of unremarkable. We're just sort of watching events play out in a way that we expect them to. Mm-hmm. There's no emotion. There's no real thrill. I mean, things are really well put together in terms of like action.
It's well shot. There's a train heist looks kind of cool.
It's not well shot. I think a lot of the photography is a big issue of mine. It's one of those films where they're clearly adding like sky in post. Like the sky is covered over by like a digital covering.
A lot of the time,
when they go out into space, there's never a shot in this movie where it's like a single spaceship against just a black starscape. They're always flying through some sort of cloudy nebula. And you can't see a lot of the action. There's a big action sequence involving a gigantic space squid.
Yeah, that's in the trailers. That's not a spoiler or nothing.
No
one complained about that.
And
that's in the trailers.
Even if it's not in the trailers, there's a scene with a space squid. That's not giving anything away. Unless there's something significant about space squids that I don't know about.
There was a squid in Rogue One.
There's been squids in a lot of the recent Star Wars movies.
A lot of squids out there.
Who is it at Lucasfilm that has the squid fetish?
Aren't they talking about how it's possible that like octopuses and that kind of animal, they're so like their DNA is unlike anything else on the planet, and it's possible that they did end up coming here on an asteroid?
I believe it.
I'm fine. Yeah, Lovecraft was right about that weird thing.
Have you seen those creatures?
They're really weird, and they taste great.
So this is now the third Star Wars film in this new wave to have feature a squid monster.
At least the second.
Because there was one in The Force Awakens that was sort of like chasing after Han Solo, like the old Han Solo.
Giant one, yeah.
There's that giant squid, and then there was like the brain probing squid monster from Rogue One. I don't remember a squid from The Last Jedi, but there's a squid back in this one.
Awesome.
It's a theme now.
Anyway,
it's a trend. But there's that scene where there's sort of giant squid monster and spaceship flying through space is in this gigantic hazy nebulous cloud, and there were certain shots where I actually couldn't really see what was going on in those shots.
Yeah,
they were so indistinctly filmed. Can't you just have the squid be out in space? That would be better looking. It doesn't have to be in the middle of this little dust cloud, like dust storm in space. And I feel like there's a lot of the action scenes and a lot of the really fast moving scenes were all set in these big cloudy arenas, and it was difficult to make out, and that's not exciting to watch.
Yeah. I'm fair with that. I think that's a fair critique. I think parts of it were framed nice, but fair enough. You were looking at different stuff than I was.
Oh, great! You pointed the camera at the moving thing. That's just base filmmaking. I'm not going to compliment that.
I want to talk about something I like in it, though. Although it leads to something I really don't like, which I really can't talk too much about without spoilers. And that's L3, Lando Calrissian's co-pilot / droid. played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, an actor who I'm not super familiar with, but I'm going to try to be because I think she's great.
She does the voice. She probably did the motion capture too.
Yeah, it's my understanding she did the motion capture too. I love this character. I really do. I've heard some people say that she's annoying. No, I think she's a badass.
Oh, she's the funny robot sidekick and has a great joke. She has one great, like, she embodies a really great joke about Star Wars, and this is the thing I really appreciate.
Well, because one of the things that we talk, and I was actually literally having this conversation. I was sitting next to, if people who listen to us on Schmoes know might know these names, Jason Inman and Ashley Robinson. We were at the same screening together. We were talking together, and we were talking about some of the stuff that, what else can they do in Star Wars that we haven't seen, and we were literally talking about how we have all of these characters who are droids, but we never talk about how oppressed droids are in Star Wars. They have personalities. They're self-aware,
but they're slaves.
But
you own them.
They're owned, and
you trade them. You buy them.
They wipe away their memories willy-nilly. Like, it's really kind of horrifying if you take them seriously as characters. And I was like, when are we going to do this?
If you assume they're sentient,
and they say they are, like, so that's really all it takes. Like. And so all of a sudden, then literally, like, the screen goes dark, and then we have to wait like half the movie for her to show up. But then L3 shows up, and this is literally her thing. She is trying to. They go to this bar where they're actually having like robot fights, where droids are hitting each other, and she's like banging on the.
This is barbaric. This is barbaric.
This is what they want us to do. They want us to fight amongst ourselves, and she's great. And I love her, and I love that she's got, like, she's really torn because she's clearly, like, attracted to Lando, but like she doesn't want to admit it, and like she's a really fully realized character in a short amount of time. And then where she ends up as a character, and like as the plot goes on, horrified me.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'm actually really uncomfortable with where they took it. I'm not going to tell you any more than that. I'm going to write an article about that for IGN. Should go up sometime this next week because I want to give people time to see it because it's like the ending, it's spoiler stuff. I don't want to be rude. But I'm really not happy with the way that they handled that plot, and I think they sullied something throughout the entire series as a result of where that character goes. And I think it's really gross. So they took something I really liked. They made a character I really liked in Han Solo, and they made something lame out of it. Like, that sucks.
The android, the droid.
Yeah,
they're not androids. They're just droids. Just right?
Droids.
Just droids. She finally addresses something that has always been sort of floating in the back of Star Wars: the servitude of the robots. They can think for themselves. They are clearly intelligent, but you can just sort of kick them around. And I imagine in the Lord and Miller version of this story, they treated all of that kind of like a joke. That that there's this whole subset of like sentient beings living among the humans, and they just don't care. And I think that's a really fantastic way to address it and kind of make a joke out of it. We can these are people, but they're not people. They're just toasters to us, and we can just sort of throw them around.
But I think what the irony is that the existence of L3 as a character and her whole sort of motivation for everything that she does kind of exposes that joke, which they've done this before. Oh, funny robots! That one other R2 blows up right after Luke's uncle buys him. I always felt pity for that robot. I felt bad for that robot.
It's an appliance. Do you feel pity for your dishwasher?
I feel pity for R2-D2 because I know R2-D2 is sentient. If anything bad happens to R2, I'm treated that as a character. You want me to treat R2-D2 and C-3PO as real characters, but not all the other droids? I think that's bullshit.
Well, then just don't treat R2-D2 or C-3PO like real characters.
But I do. They want me to. But here's the thing. They could have actually had a real conversation about this, and honestly, like, this may be, if Lord and Miller were going to treat that as a joke, and we're just guessing, we don't know if they would have. They know when to take things seriously. They really do. Treating it seriously works, but then the way that the plot takes that character doesn't as a result of that. And so it's really lame. Moving on. Here's the thing with Solo, a Star Wars story. It's not very good.
No, it's just...
It's not terrible, but like it's just sort of like...
It's useless, and I'll get back to that point I mentioned earlier. And I said this when Rogue One came out, and this is why it really kind of angered me the way it did, Rogue One. When Disney buys Star Wars, they say we're going to put new Star Wars films into production, and we're going to put out something that is very retro. We're going to do something that feels a lot like a Star Wars, and we're going to tell a very similar story with very similar characters.
The original Star Wars, not the prequels.
Not the prequels. Yeah. It's going to be the 1977 Star Wars film, kind of rejiggered a little bit for a modern audience. Okay, it feels very much the same, but now you've proven you can do a Star Wars film. now that you're going to put these new films into production, how are you going to expand? What are you going to explore in the Star Wars universe? You can do anything you like. Well, we're going to do something that has to do with events and characters that you already know, and we're going to put them back in the movie. And why are we stuck with this very limited span of time, this particular set of historical elements from the Star Wars universe, when there's all these hints, all these interesting aliens, all these androids, all these weird things happening in the background that we can go explore and go deeper into and really expand on the universe? And it really angered me that when I realized that the only interest Disney had was to orbit around the exact same set of characters.
I have two things to say about that. First off, they are planning to do new things. Rian Johnson's going to do a whole new trilogy of films that apparently don't have a direct relation. That's good. But
Great. Let's get to that.
But that's in the future,
yeah.
and they're spending a lot of time. They're spending a lot of time just focusing on this. And I honestly, everything you just said, I think it betrays the studio's lack of faith in Star Wars. I really do. I really do think that, like, the fact that, okay, so what's our first, like, ancillary movie going to be? Like, Rogue One. Okay, all right, that's going to be kind of fun. Solo, prequel. And it might be a trilogy.
Again?
And it might be a trilogy of prequels.
Oh, jeez.
Then we're going to do Boba Fett.
Well, and why?
And Obi-Wan.
We saw how Boba Fett was born, and we saw him die. What else can we do with Boba Fett?
I've heard people argue, but we need to do an Obi-Wan movie because Ewan McGregor is now, like, age appropriate. That's not a good reason to make a movie.
Well, we saw what happened to him too. We saw him as a young. Was it going to be before? I think it'd be
between episodes 3 and 4. Like between Revenge of the Sith and New Hope. That's the idea.
So
that sweet spot where he was on the run. He was hiding out.
But he was on Luke Skywalker's planet that whole time.
That's my thing. People are like, oh,
at the end of episode 3, he moved onto that planet. Presumably, he was just staying there that whole time.
People say like, oh, well, what happened to him after that? We saw it was episode 4, A New Hope.
Yeah,
that's what that was. If these were important stories, and here's the thing: we know they can't be important stories. We know they can't change too much because they have to drop the character off in time for another set. Like we have to have these moments. All of these prequels that they're doing is basically just saying like, hey, let's just do what's safe. What's really safe. And I appreciate that Last Jedi took some chances, but they're really mitigating that with the safest possible bets.
Like, Last Jedi was the only one to... And a character actually said this on screen, let's just wipe the slate clean. Let's get rid of this same old conflict. I'm tired of it.
Ironically, that's the bad guy. Maybe that's why Disney doesn't believe it.
I agree with the bad guy in that one. I agree with what the bad guy was trying to do. Let's just start over. Let's just kill them all and not worry about the ancient conflict that Star Wars has,
and ironically,
previously been predicated.
I've heard that said, "Oh, but he was the bad guy." Yoda says it too.
Yeah.
It's all about the new generation's got to be better than the last one.
Let the books burn. The only history books we have ever seen in Star Wars catch on fire. Well, they burn down the Star Wars history.
They had computer databases in like episode 2.
Well, yeah.
In all fairness, but
have you? I'm sure fans have noticed this, but it took me until recently to realize that there's no writing in Star Wars. Nobody's ever reading a book.
We see someone writing a book in Solo.
That's right.
There's so they do exist.
It's the first time, but
they do exist. It is a thing.
I like Paul Bettany's performance.
He's okay.
He's fine as kind of a bad guy. Woody Harrelson plays a Woody Harrelson type role. Tandy Newton isn't in the movie enough.
Not nearly enough. Not nearly enough. I had another point I was going to make about sort of Star Wars overall, but basically my point is this: Star Wars is old. Star Wars is over 40 years old now. That's old. That's about as old. I said this before. It's about as old as the Flash Gordon serials that inspired Star Wars were when Star Wars came out.
Yeah.
StarArs is an institution. I saw an article about like, oh, is Deadpool cooler than Han Solo now?
Yeah.
Yes. Han Solo is your dad now. Han Solo is your dad's... Solo, a Star Wars story, is your dad's like half-drunk story at Thanksgiving about the time he did that cool thing in the war. Now, I'm not saying it's not a cool story, but like that's your dad's story.
Even Deadpool is your dad's story. The character's 20 years old. He's kind of a retro character by the time he gets to movies.
Deadpool's a weirder situation, though, because the version of Deadpool everyone loves so much didn't really become a thing until more recently than the character's creation.
Yeah.
But yeah, fair enough. But even so, to movies, he's new. And to a lot of people, most people didn't read the comics. So he's new to them. But this Star Wars this is not cool Star Wars. This is hokey Star Wars. This is just doing everything that George Lucas tried to stop doing with A New Hope. He tried to take things into a new direction. Is Solo, a Star Wars story, a particularly bad movie? No, I don't think it's a very good movie.
No,
there are things I like about it. I would watch it again if you put it in front of me and they were just like, you got to watch this now. I'm like, all right.
It's disposable.
It's just middle of the road.
It's really forgettable. The events are unremarkable.
It might not be the worst Star Wars movie, but is the least interesting Star Wars movie.
That's for sure. Even the Ewok movies are more fascinatingly strange than anything that happens in Solo.
So a bit of a downer. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about another downer.
Okay.
Let's talk about Mary Shelley.
Mary Shelley is a biopic by Haifa Al-Mansour. It is the biopic of Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley authored Frankenstein. She lived in sin with Percy Bysshe Shelley.
Eventually they married.
But
initially,
for
he was married and she was living with him.
She, as a teenager, she ran away from home to live in sin with Percy Shelley. Her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, was one of the feminists of English literature, and her Vindication of the Rights of Woman is a must-read for everyone. It is a great piece of lit. So she was raised with a lot of these ultra-feminist philosophies, and her father, who was also a successful author, was a very smart person who encouraged her to think for herself. Percy was
a cad.
An obnoxious type of college anarchist.
Okay.
Who tries to sound really cool by saying like anarchist stuff, but who isn't as cool as he thinks.
Here's the deal with Mary Shelley, the movie. When you're doing a biopic, one of the decisions you have to make is, are we just going to try to tell it like it was or like we think it was? Or are we going to try to find a lens through which we can perceive this in a more contemporary fashion?
Yeah.
Good example of this is Milos Forman's Amadeus, where he tried to treat obviously the story of Amadeus in that movie is fictionalized, but he tried to sort of equate classic music to kind of punk rock. It was very rebellious.
Yeah.
There was a lot of petty infighting. There were pink wigs, hot pink wigs. Like it was hip.
And the way Mozart's music shook up the establishment is really felt in Amadeus.
Yeah.
And Percy Shelley's poetry and his philosophy shook the establishment. It was really daring and outrageous at the time. The movie doesn't let us feel that. And I think that's its one central failing.
I think it is trying to do two things simultaneously. I think it is trying to be like this sort of staid, serious, frocky biopic. And I think it's trying to give us that lens, though. I think it's trying to get I think we both pointed this out in our reviews. Mary Shelley has like a perfect knit the first beret, like you get at an Urban Outfitters. Like it's perfect.
The first shot we see of Mary, she's played by Elle Fanning.
Great actor.
In two Elle Fanning films this week. She's sitting in a cemetery in a cable knit sweater and a beret, like writing ghost stories in a little Moleskine journal. And the shot could be, modern day Brooklyn. I think they're trying to say that she's sort of like a modern day hipster with sort of ideas of her own.
She was ahead of her time. You too could be like Mary Shelley, and I appreciate that. But
had they run with the modernity of it, then we would have seen a lot more of the modern parallels. But it starts to scale back almost immediately. She meets Percy. Percy's played by Douglas Booth, handsome guy. Romance book cover handsome book guy with pouty lips, and he's really a boring version of Percy Shelley. He's good looking and he says just the right things, but his actual modern equivalency, like what he says, what his poetry is doing to modern society, isn't really felt, because we don't really see his impact on society at large. We only see the two of them kind of going into small rooms and drinking a lot and talking about atheism and anarchy.
And this is one of the problems when you make a movie about an artist. You need to see the art. You need to feel the art. And it's hard to do that with literature. I appreciate that. But you need to get that impact.
It's easy with Shelley because he's a poet and you can just yell those lines. And when they recite some of Percy's poetry, the actors aren't doing anything with it. They're just sort of saying it.
There's a bit, Mary Shelley meets Percy at basically a slam poetry session at a posh country club. Like, that's the way it plays out. And he's just like, Percy, and I'm paraphrasing this, but this is, if it was made today, this is what he would say. Yeah, I don't have anything. I'm just going to freestyle something.
Yeah.
And then he just does this absurd posturing, and it's just like, yeah! And it's just like, okay, thank you, Ronnie James Dio worshipping wannabe. Like,
you go to Dio.
Like, this is like, that's the kind of like hip, cool, sexual, sensual, like, you know, ooh, what a rock star. He's a rock star poet, and you never get that.
I loved Ian Curtis before he sold out.
But here, so she ends up, she falls in love with Shelley. She finds out he's married. And it sucks, and then she's like, oh, I'm not going to date him. But then she was just like, no, I have to live the life my mother would have wanted for me. And so she lives in sin with him, and he fucks everything up forever. Wow. And then they...
And they both... He says, free love. We're all about free love. It's like, that's our revolutionary thing. First of all, if you're going to have free love, you need to show them throwing that in the face of the squares, which never happens.
Yeah.
Just, tool, and he's just seen as a cat who's sleeping around. It's like, but free love, I'm not sure how much I want free love. I think I want to be able to choose free love, I'm not going to choose that.
It's a movie where the text says we support this and we believe in this, but the actual implementation says they don't. And it's actually very judgmental. Not just about Percy, who I appreciate this is Mary's perspective, and Percy sucks, but like... Mary Shelley, it's like the movie's disappointed in her for her life decisions. Like, she makes some hard decisions, and she tries to own them.
And she seems to make a really bad one at the film's end.
Which,
is really unfortunate. The film works up to the publication of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Which, is when it kind of really takes off, when she finally writes something and gets to confront people about, what they think about Frankenstein, which is a really confrontational, scary, horrific story.
It's a brilliant novel, and it really was unlike a lot of other things at the time.
And she's a young, very young person, a young woman, trying to sell this really, horrific story to publishers. And it's not until she starts screaming at publishers that I feel like the film is really taking off. But we need more screaming. We need more punk.
Here's the irony, though, and it's something that the movie kind of glances over, and I appreciate that you're building Mary Shelley up, but you're tearing other people down. They talk about how, women shouldn't be writing horror. This is macabre. And I get that, and I know that...
Shake your jowls some more.
Initially, horror was considered, and this is my understanding based on, English lit professors and things, but it was a woman genre. It was actually like Gothic literature was written by women. It was seen as lesser literature. Men didn't want to deal with it. And it was considered like, men won't write it. But women were writing this stuff, and they were actually extremely influential. And like Anne Radcliffe, for example, I wanted to make sure I remembered her name. Right. She was a really important, influential horror author who predates Mary Shelley. The movie just kind of glosses over that and say that Mary Shelley invented it, which is like, if you're going to have this message about the greatness of this women author, you don't need to tear down all the other ones. It's kind of frustrating. And the movie ends up like kind of selling Frankenstein really short as well, because it's just like her sister literally tells her like, a Frankenstein, yes, it's all about abandonment. Yes. And many other things. She's a more complicated person than that, and we're kind of glossing over everything.
How they had to like sort of focus in on the creation of Frankenstein and explore one theme, and I'm kind of okay with that.
I just feel like they basically made it too simple. They just said she had a shitty marriage and her mother died, hence Frankenstein. And I just feel like they really didn't have any real innate understanding of a human being and the way artistry really functions, and the way interesting people make interesting art. It just seems really perfunctory.
I'm just really glad it wasn't daddy issues. Remember when we saw Molly's Game?
Ironically, she had really huge daddy issues.
And she had really huge daddy issues.
Mary Shelley had huge daddy issues. And like her second book, it's weird and creepy. Like, that's the thing.
There needs to be a lot more style here. We walked out of this movie and we thought, who could have made this movie? And you either need somebody really kind of raucous and confrontational, like maybe not Alex Cox, but at least a Daniel Waters, somebody who has at least a wicked sense of humor, who could bring a little bit more of a modern sensibility into Mary Shelley's world, or Sofia Coppola, who already kind of did this with Marie Antoinette. But do it again. Do it with Mary Shelley. I wouldn't mind.
I'm fine.
Yeah. Like trying to see a lot of the modern parallels between what Mary Shelley is doing. Haifa al-Mansour, I think she's Saudi, and she you could perhaps read that this is a parallel between the way Saudi women are treated or the way women are treated in the Middle East, but that's not really stressed. That's just sort of a read you bring to it. I don't think that's something that's in the movie. So yeah, I feel like there's some modernity that is missing from Mary Shelley. It's just sort of a bland recounting of events.
There are ways to look at Mary Shelley's life that are actually really fascinating and really interesting and super duper relevant, because Frankenstein is super duper relevant. So she has these depths inside of her, and they just make it this kind of limp, sad life equals great art biopic. And they try to treat the relationship with Shelley, with Percy Shelley, as kind of romantic at the end, and it's not. Like, when it gets, like, kind of romantic ending, you're just sort of like, yeah, I don't buy that at all. That's some bullshit right there.
And there was one thing I was really, really disappointed by. And there's all this build-up to meeting Byron.
Oh,
now, now, if you don't know Lord Byron, like, reportedly saved his own tears in crystal vials and, was really the example of the self-pitying white rich poet brat. And, super bisexual, totally drunk all the time.
The Andy Warhol of his time.
Yeah. And I was hoping that there's all this buildup. We're going to go see Byron. Where's Byron? Let's talk about Byron. We're going to go to Byron's mansion. Oh, great. We're finally going to meet Byron. And I expect Byron to come out wearing nothing but peacock feathers with a woman under one arm and a boy under the other, and, like a bottle of brandy balanced on his genitals, just something really completely hedonistic. And this guy comes out and he's wearing eye makeup. He looks like Jack Sparrow, and he kisses Shelley on the mouth and just goes back inside. It's like, oh, well, that's not as big as you were building him up to be. I want a bigger Byron. I want a big, stupid Byron. I want to see a Ken
Byron.
Russell version of Lord Byron, which we had.
Well, actually, we did have that. It's called Gothic. It's all about that big weekend they spent together.
86, I think? It was
around there.
Mid-80s.
Yeah. That's a really good movie, and that's a way better movie than Mary Shelley. Let's move on. Let's tell me about How to Talk to Girls at Parties, the other Elle Fanning movie.
This is the other Elle Fanning movie, and it's also punk-themed, strangely enough, and also doesn't have enough punk, strangely enough. This is John Cameron Mitchell's new film. He's the director of Hedwig and the Angry Inch. He did Short Bus. He did Rabbit Hole, which I didn't see.
I didn't see that. Oh, wait, no, I didn't see Short Bus. I saw Rabbit Hole.
Okay.
It's good. It's more straightforward, melodramatic, but it's really well made.
Yeah. John Cameron Mitchell is really, really, he's a very emotional director. He likes to ratchet up all of the emotions, and not artificially. He's really trying to find the depths of heart in his material. You watch Hedwig and the Angry Inch, and it is a deeply abiding tragedy. It is a very sad, deeply romantic movie. And he plays up the silliness, but he's careful to keep the heart deeply intact. And I think that's why people respond to Hedwig as strongly as they do.
Yeah.
This is based on a story by Neil Gaiman, short story. And it is about a bunch of teenage punker boys in the 1970s. They can't get into a party. They wander the landscape of their city, and they find their way into a space alien party. It's kind of like Rocky Horror in that regard.
That sounds awesome.
And there's a bunch of space aliens wearing vinyl and doing these kind of Cirque du Soleil dances, and we learn that they're kind of tourists on Earth, and they're trying to absorb experiences, but not too much experience. They can't interact too much. And they run into Elle Fanning, who is tired of the oppressive alien regime, and they spirit off with her, and she says things like, "Teach me how to punk. Teach me the punk. I want to be a punk." And she's the main character takes her out into the world, and they learn to rebel in sort of that 1970s British punk fashion. Now,
okay, hang on.
It sounds awesome, I know.
I'm going to say this right now. All I knew about this movie was that Elle Fanning was in it, and that it was called How to Talk to Girls at Parties.
All right.
I thought this was going to be some shitty teen rom-com. I don't know. I don't know if it's good or not, but I will say this. They should have changed that title, because that does not make me want to go see it.
How to Talk to Girls at Parties.
Your description of the plot makes you want to go see it. That's good marketing. The description of the title should just be Whitney's description, just as the whole poster.
It could just be like space versus punkers, whatever it is you got. But it is, at the end of the day, a teen rom-com. It is about these two teenagers falling deeply and abidingly in love, and kind of what that means, the different versions of rebellion, and how that corresponds to their respective societies and the eventual clash of their societies. Now, the punk isn't played up enough, though. There's a version of this, like, I'm thinking of Repo Man, another punk / space alien movie that is the height of cinema. It's one of the great movies. I love Repo Man so damn much. I saw it at age 30, and I regret it that I didn't see it at age 15, because it would have changed my life had I seen it 15 years earlier. I love Repo Man a lot, and it has this very kind of raucous, almost mean-spirited anger that what punk is always about. It's about just giving a middle finger to the man. It's about handing something that generations have fostered and throwing it on the ground and breaking it. That is punk. And that sort of rebellion ends up taking a back seat to this kind of very sweet and very well-meaning romantic chemistry between the two leads. There is a lot of wild sexual stuff going on. When the aliens have sex, they grow clones of themselves, or maybe the clones were in the bodies altogether, before. It's hard to say. But it never feels as mean or as subversive as it can. It's just sort of a weird setup that ends up turning into something very kind of typical by the end. Yeah. And there's a lot of people weeping and a lot of I love yous and a lot of just really earnest emotions that John Cameron Mitchell is really good at doing that seem really out of place in this totally bonkers premise.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah. So it starts out really bonkers and then it loses, it feels like it loses its nerve after a while.
Oh, that's a shame. Because you can do both.
You can do both.
You can do, like, even Rocky Horror has sincereness. Like, the ending of Rocky Horror is melancholy. The ending of Rocky Horror is melancholy.
That's true.
Like,
it's about a fall from grace.
It hits melancholy by the end. Like, you have all the fun, but then you come crashing down at the end. Like, it hits all that range.
And all I know is still the beast is feeding. Yeah, there's just a lot of sadness at the end of Rocky Horror.
Yeah.
But you go to a Rocky Horror Picture Show screening, and everybody's just having a raucous good time. So you can kind of forget it's in there.
Yeah, I like Rocky Horror the movie without the fan experience.
I'm eager to see if this one will pick up the cult following that it perhaps is poised for, because it does have that emotional earnestness that a lot of cult audiences might attach themselves to, as well as a daring premise, something you don't see in every movie.
Well, I'll have to check it out at some point. So is it just kind of
It's just kind of It didn't leave me really excited about it, unfortunately.
What about In Darkness? Are you excited about In Darkness?
In Darkness, I'm excited about the first half of In Darkness, because In Darkness, dig this. This is like straight out of something De Palma or Polanski might make. Natalie Dormer from the Hunger Games movies, she's in Game of Thrones, plays a blind pianist who plays musical scores for thrillers. And indeed, the first shot of the movie is a close-up of a woman being strangled to death. It's a close-up of her face as she's dying. And the camera pulls back, and we see that it's just a movie screen, and we pan over to the orchestra playing the music.
That's very De Palma,
Yeah, she's constantly listening to these kinds of thriller music on cassette in her apartment, so there's this diegetic reason for that music to be part. Yeah, it's totally De Palma. And of course, her mysterious upstairs neighbor, a Russian played by Emily Ratajkowski. She is embroiled in some sort of intrigue, and she's blind. She only knows this woman through voice. She ends up slipping on one of her scarves and ends up keeping the scarf, and it turns out that scarf is really, really significant. The scent on it is really, really significant because it all ties into a deposed Serbian tyrant who's been living nearby Natalie Dormer this whole time. And there's this big political intrigue about Russian spies all of a sudden.
I thought we were just doing Cat O' Nine Tails. Like, this is...
Yeah, and had it been this weird sort of, and it turns out she had a stalker, or it turns out she was the stalker, or turns out there's somebody living in the blind girl's apartment. If it was some sort of weird intrigue like that and had continued in this kind of thriller hothouse where there's thriller music constantly playing and stayed on that De Palma level, it would have been really exciting. But then there are reveals about sort of a relationship between the Natalie Dormer character and some other ancillary characters that we've met. Julie Richardson shows up as like maybe some sort of spy master, or maybe just some sort of evil sounding femme fatale. And as the intrigues start piling up and the more and more plot points are revealed and the more about the characters revealed, the less and less interesting it becomes. And it just turns into sort of a rote spy thriller.
I get the impression that sometimes people who make thrillers think that in order to keep our attention, they have to throw in more plot. You don't. It just needs to be, you need to be captivated with the characters and you want no bad to come to them.
Yeah.
And yet what plot you have forces them into harm's way. That's it. That's all you really need. You don't have to add more.
It's easy to just introduce more about the character without necessarily changing the plot significantly. Look at M. Night Shyamalan's Split, for instance, where a lot of young women characters are trapped. We learn a little bit more about the villain, and that makes him just seem more villainous. It doesn't change the plot significantly because it's still about the women having to escape this monstrous man. This doesn't do that. This does sort of fundamentally change a lot of the plot points and a lot of things about the character as it goes along. And it feels like they're just reaching a little bit too far.
No, that's too bad.
A little bit too hard.
Well,
so, yeah.
Natalie Dormer.
Kind of a disappointing week at the movies.
Well, but however, if you go to Amazon Prime, they have a new miniseries also starring Natalie Dormer of Picnic at Hanging Rock. And I want to talk about this because I think the original Picnic at Hanging Rock isn't as well known as it should be nowadays, and I think the remake does something kind of interesting. Maybe not wholly successful, but certainly interesting. Okay. So Picnic at Hanging Rock is based on an Australian novel, and it is a story. It was originally presented as though it was a true story. It was not. But it was a story about an all-girls college, young women in Australia. They went on a picnic to this very ancient and real mountain, Rocky Mountain. They went on a picnic. 3 of them and 1 of their teachers never came back.
They just disappear.
Yep.
They never find the bodies.
No evidence of foul play.
Yep.
Nothing. More happens beyond that, but it's just a total mystery.
And the movie that Peter Weir made based on this novel
in 1975,
and it's a great movie. You should see it. I think it's probably on Filmstruck.
It's on Criterion.
Yeah, Criterion did it. It deals very much with sort of the repercussions of the mystery in the lives of the survivors.
Yeah, it's not.
And I don't even call them survivors because we don't know if they died. They're just gone.
I watched this movie recently, and it really does feel like a precursor to Twin Peaks. The idea is that something mysterious and terrible, presumably terrible, happened to these young women, but it's all about how other people look at them. Twin Peaks is not about Laura Palmer. Twin Peaks is how other people saw Laura Palmer and what they didn't see. And as we learn more things about how tragic her life was, we realize that even the people who claimed to love her didn't love her. They only loved what they saw. Peter Weir's movie is a movie about looking at those girls. They're wearing virginal white. We never really get a huge lot of detail about their characters. We are looking at them. The other characters are looking at them, and then the other characters don't see them anymore. And the other characters feel the absence. They feel the lack. And this drives some people to insanity. This drives some people to obsessiveness. This drives some people to depression and possibly suicide.
Some people it's the accusations that start coming up that really kind of underline what that movie's about, because it's. You talk about sort of looking at these women from afar and seeing only virginal, perfect, platonic ideals of these people.
Or in some cases, they see prurients. They see women who are there to be.
It's when a character is finally assigned actual human complexity that they become villainous. And I think that's a really fascinating facet that Peter Weir put in his movie.
The movie is very dreamlike. The movie is very creepy, and it never gives you answers. Don't go in expecting answers.
It's not that kind of mystery.
It's not, and it is endlessly fascinating, and that's great. But when you look at it, especially today, I think you're going to look at it, and this is a story of men, and in particular Peter Weir, looking at women and not getting it. No idea. Women are weird, fascinating, like dreams to Peter Weir, at least in that movie. The new Picnic at Hanging Rock is mostly directed and written by women. And a lot of the things that Peter Weir found inexplicable and ethereal, they just understand.
It's just part of their lives.
It's just part of the lives. Yeah. And so the new Picnic at Hanging Rock is a 6-part miniseries, and it's more about those girls as characters. And it's more about their disappearance, and it even also imagines their disappearance potentially as... Maybe it's a mystery, maybe it's a murder mystery, maybe something science fictional is going on, something fantastical is going on, or maybe it's a liberation, and maybe they're free from all this crap. And I appreciate that perspective. I think that's really cool. I think the miniseries has a really nice, sharp, almost Brian Fuller-esque style to it, which I think is really very gorgeous and kind of creates this oppression that the dreamlike qualities of Hanging Rock can be an escape from. But it's so long that they have to fill it up with so much more character and so much more melodrama that you do lose the mystery, and it no longer quite has the same impact. But I think it is a valuable follow-up and a valuable new interpretation of the same story. So I'm torn on it. I don't think it's as effective cinematically, but it's more interesting as a conversation.
So it uses its time to explore new facets that the feature film failed to.
Yes.
But it has too much time, so it's mostly padding.
Yeah. So anyway, Picnic at Hanging Rock. If you can see the original film, do, and if that fascinates you, I recommend the miniseries. I'm very curious to see what it would be like to watch the miniseries first and then watch the movie, though.
Yeah.
No idea what that would be like. Maybe the miniseries is more engaging when you haven't already seen the film, and the mystery is more intriguing, but I can't go back.
Yeah.
I can't redo that.
Yeah,
so it's interesting, and there you go. So on the critically acclaimed scale of C- to C+, obviously Picnic at Hanging Rock, the original is a C+. The new one is a C. It would be a C+ if maybe if it was tighter, maybe if it was 4 episodes instead of 6. Feels like they didn't need 6 whole episodes to get it across.
Yeah.
But there's a lot I recommend about it. In Darkness?
In Darkness, low C. It's not terrible, but it's not really remarkable.
How to Talk to Girls at Parties?
A C. Okay. Ambitious and strange, but not wholly successful.
Mary Shelley, a well-intentioned C-.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not angry at it, but it's not really doing the subject material any justice.
And it's a pity, because this could have been a really interesting film about a really interesting person.
It's a good cast. It's a fascinating subject. It's a fascinating person. There's so much you could have done with it, and this feels like a book report. It's not great. And Solo, a Star Wars story.
This is C-. There's really no reason to see this movie. There just
it's
isn't.
A high C-, because if you find yourself seeing this movie, you won't hate it. Like
you'll giggle a few times, but yeah.
But there's no real reason you have to go to it.
Yeah.
You don't need to see this. This is like it's not even like, but it's so much fun. Like it's not like Deadpool where it's like it's got problems, but it's fun. Here it's just like.
Just
okay. I like the people involved.
I like the actors.
Bits I liked.
Yeah, it's a good Harrison Ford charm impersonation, but
no, thank you.
You learn Chewbacca's age.
No,
if that's significant.
Is where we're going with this. So let's move on to our main event: all the Rambo movies.
There are 5 of them. If you count Son of Rambo, which we didn't watch.
We didn't watch. Oh, shit. We probably should have watched
that. Should have watched Son of
Damn
Rambo.
It. Why didn't we watch that? That would have been a really nice aperitif to all of this. So, Rambo. Rambo is a franchise of motion pictures about a Vietnam veteran played by Sylvester Stallone.
John Rambo.
It was based on a novel originally written by a guy whose name I don't remember. David Morrell.
Okay.
Wrote a novel called First Blood. It was optioned, and like a whole bunch of big actors were like almost in it. Like Al Pacino was almost Rambo, and that'd be a very different movie. Ended up going to Sylvester Stallone. And people have this idea of Rambo in their heads.
Like what the character represents.
Yeah, and I think it's mostly based off of the poster of Rambos. Like all the posters, especially like from 2 onward. It's muscle bound, glistening.
Like really oily.
Yeah, like this period. There was this period in the 80s, and we don't really have it anymore, where action movies celebrated the male body. Like they fetishized muscles. And this was the age of Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's the age when Sylvester Stallone really worked out a lot.
And also it was the age of like juicing. That was part of it, professional wrestling. A lot of these bodybuilders, a lot of these guys were juicing, and that's kind of the type of body that was being sold as the masculine ideal.
And it's interesting to see how that transition happens over the course of the Rambo movies, because First Blood came out in 1982, but it doesn't feel like an 80s movie.
It feels like it should have come out in like 76.
Yeah, again, there's this period of time, like we like to think of decades as this very clean cut. Oh, there's a 90s movie and an 80s movie. The beginning of every decade, we're still getting trickle off from the previous decade. So like the first couple of years of the 90s, we were still getting movies that felt like 80s movies. The first couple of years of the 80s, we were still getting movies that felt like 70s movies. But when you have a franchise, it's always interesting to see the cutoff. Like you watch the first 3 Friday the 13th movies, and they feel like 70s movies. You watch Friday the 13th Part 4, boom, all of a sudden we're in the 80s.
And that didn't come out till 84.
So it looks, it's shinier, the music is different, it's shot different. everything about it feels 80s all of a sudden. And that happened real hard in the Rambos.
Between the first and the second specifically.
So like the first Rambo movie is this really hard-hitting survivalist thriller with really serious, like very cynical political undertones. And then the two sequels that came out in the 80s, and we'll talk about the last one last. The two sequels that came out in the 80s, that's the image everyone has of Rambo. And those are balls to the wall, rah, war is awesome action movies.
Super jingoistic. Definitely played into the politics of the 1980s.
Yeah.
Almost the polar opposite of First Blood.
I would actually argue I cannot think of another movie series in which the sequel, at least the first sequel, is such a huge tonal and thematic about face from the original than Rambo. I think Rambo is the biggest shift from the first one to the second one I've ever seen.
One could say Alien, perhaps. Alien to Aliens.
That's a big one.
One's a horror movie, one's an action movie. And
both written by James Cameron.
No, all right.
James Cameron wrote Aliens, and he wrote First Blood Part 2. He was heavily rewritten by Sylvester Stallone, but he did work on that, and apparently the story goes he had the option of directing either of those movies.
Wow.
He chose wisely.
Well, maybe not. I mean, if he had done First Blood Part 2, it would have been a James Cameron joint. It would have been bigger and explodier and just as impressive as something like Aliens.
I'm not sure Aliens would have been as good, but whatever.
Well, whoever would have done Aliens would have done a Rambo 2 job on it.
Look, let me have my alternate reality fantasies, okay?
All right, fine.
Anyway, let's talk about the first Rambo movie. It's First Blood. And it starts with Stallone as John Rambo, and when we meet him, he's back from the Vietnam War. He's been back for a while.
It's in the tradition of films like Rolling Thunder and Coming Home and other sort of soldiers home from Vietnam, The Deer Hunter.
You can tell a lot about the way a society views a war by the way they tell stories about after the war.
Yeah.
And, you know, the stories about coming home from World War II, there was sadness there, but there was a lot of Americana. You look at the best years of our lives, and there's a real romance to it. You know,
there's a lot of darkness in the best years of our lives.
There's a lot of darkness in it, but at the same time...
That's a great movie,
That's a brilliant movie. I'm not saying Best Years of Our Lives is a happy-go-lucky movie by a long shot. There's a lot of sadness there, but there's a certain, like... But it's important that we went.
And that the soldiers who come back, however damaged they are, will recover.
Yeah, there was hope.
There's a little bit of hope there.
A lot of the stories about people coming back from Vietnam were very dark.
Incredibly hopeless.
Very, very grim. And honestly, there were a lot of action movies that were in the 70s and the 80s that were about people who had come back from Vietnam and had brought violence back in their heart.
They were damaged, if not physically, they were definitely damaged mentally. They were broken by the war experience in Vietnam.
And John Rambo in this first movie, and particularly in this first movie, is as damaged and as believably damaged, honestly, for a big chunk of it, a Vietnam vet as we've seen in a movie. It's actually a really good performance, I think, from Sylvester Stallone. He's a drifter, doesn't have anywhere to go, can't hold down a job, and he decides to visit a friend of his from the war. First scene, he just goes up to the guy's house and says, "Hey, yeah, I came to see my old friend." And she's like, "Yeah, he got cancer. Yeah, all the chemicals they used in Vietnam, they gave him cancer and he died." And then he's just like, shit, everything sucks. Yeah, everything sucks. I have nothing now. And so he's just going to walk through this town, and then the sheriff, played by Brian Dennehy,
as the world's most evil sheriff this side of a Smokey and the Bandit movie,
he just sees Rambo coming into town, and picks him up and says, "Hey, let me drive you through town. You don't want to be here." And then as he's like driving Rambo, he starts giving him more shit, and Rambo's just like, "What's your problem?" And the guy's just like, "We just don't want drifters in this town. We'll get more people like you." And he drops Rambo off on the outskirts of town, and then Rambo, in a moment of defiance, walks back into town. Right then, he arrests Rambo and proceeds to basically put him through a hugely triggering post-traumatic stress situation.
Putting him in prison and belittling him.
Rambo was a POW. He was tortured. He went through hell. And the abusive, just overtly abusive behavior on the part of the cops, one of them played by young David Caruso.
That's right.
I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot he was in this. It breaks him. And he ends up having a violent outburst, breaks a guy's nose, runs out, steals a motorcycle, tries to drive out of town. They chase him into the woods, and then he's just surviving in the woods, and the sheriff's department keeps sending people out to get him. and he keeps having to fight them off. He just wants them to leave him alone. And they won't do it because of their macho bullshit pride.
And because of his, I guess, his training or just the way his mind has been rewired by the war, he goes into war mode.
Yeah.
And it's depicted as a tragedy when he slips into that mode. He has been spending the years since the war trying to avoid thinking like that.
Yeah.
Trying to avoid thinking like a soldier, because
trying to
a soldier,
be human again.
Yeah, a soldier is an inhuman murderer in the world of Rambo.
Mm-hmm.
And what the military did to the soldiers is a wicked thing. And when Richard Crenna is called in, who is his superior, who trained him,
Colonel Troutman,
to sort of explain to Brian Dennehy what is exactly going on, he finally has a conversation, and he gets to say what the title means. It's like, Richard Crenna asks John Rambo, why are you doing this? And he says, they drew first blood. They did it.
Yeah.
They started this, and now he has to see it through. That's the only thing his mind is capable of.
That's how he was trained to be, and he went through hell. When people talk about the word trigger as though it's kind of meaningless, as though it's just like, don't remind me. Triggering is an actual thing, and it causes people to relive a severely traumatic event in their lives. And it's not, I remember it, it's I am living through it right now, and it activates a fight or flight response. It is a big fucking deal, and it is what First Blood is about. It puts him in a fight or flight response, and this guy knows how to fight, and he will fight. And it is brutal. And
the skill with which he fights is not depicted as heroic. It's not badass.
There's a couple of badass stunts where you watch it and you go, wow.
It's a badass stunt because you're kind of astonished at how well he does this.
Yeah.
But you're also kind of horrified at how well he does that. No one should be good at that. That's terrible that he's good at these things. And the entire tone of the movie is like really, really kind of somber and dark as a result. It's his capability of fighting is the worst possible thing that can happen to a person.
Yeah.
Being a capable soldier is a terrible thing in the world of Rambo, because it turns you into this kind of murdering machine. All patriotism, all cause for the war. It doesn't matter what it is anymore. You've been turned into this horrible killing meat machine.
Yeah, it's interesting because it has a lot of sympathy for soldiers. It's really anti-police.
It's anti-police. It's anti-war. It's anti-Vietnam. It's really,
very pro-soldier though. But it's an interesting perspective for this badass action movie to have.
It's pro-veteran is what it is.
Well,
it's help these people because they've been damaged by the war, or come back and help the veterans. This guy's just a drifter who is going to be triggered into murdering somebody unless we take care of these people.
And indeed, we see this today, mental health issues involving veterans of war are pervasive, and they need to be treated. Yeah. We need to deal with this issue. This movie should not still be relevant.
So it's pro-veteran, but it's I think it's very anti-military.
I think it's very anti-military, but regardless of whether anti-military, it's certainly anti-fascistic approaches to control and violence. And I'm seriously like, you look at this movie and you look at what it spawned, and it's like, how did you get First Blood Part 2 from First Blood? And I'm going to tell you how, because I think it's actually really fascinating. But yeah, it's really interesting. Now, there's a couple of things I really want to note about First Blood before we move on. Firstly, apparently this movie was heavily re-edited.
Really?
Yeah. There is an alternate ending in which Rambo died. Well, this is just, people know this. Yeah. Rambo died. And then apparently people who watched the movie were just like, Rambo can't die?
That's too sad.
We feel bad for Rambo. We don't want him to die. So that's not how... So we had a franchise. Apparently, and I haven't done as much research as I would have liked, but apparently there was a longer cut of this movie in which there was more Rambo and there was more talking. And apparently Sylvester Stallone hated that version. He basically insisted that they re-edit it and made it a movie about people reacting to Rambo. And so it's about Brian Dennehy trying to capture Rambo more than it is about Rambo. And I think that really creates a different vibe to it, and it kind of turns the movie... We talked a lot about looking at it from Rambo's perspective, and I think it's very sensitive about Rambo's perspective, but there's not a lot of conversation about it except for one really bravura scene at the end. Like one of Sylvester Stallone's best acting moments. When you look at it from Brian Dennehy's perspective, this is a Godzilla movie. This is the horror of war is revisited upon us, but this is just a monster is rampaging through the city. Like, it's kind of fascinating, actually.
Brian Dennehy hates John Rambo because he kind of hates vagrants. It reads as maybe something like it's anti-homelessness, anti-veteran.
Mm-hmm. In the book, I can tell you this much. In the book, there was more clear that Dennehy's character was a Korean War vet. And he, that his war is forgotten.
Okay,
and
so he kind of resents the new generation.
It's basically
of
a Korean War vet using Korean War tactics against a Vietnam vet. Like, that was the idea.
Okay.
That doesn't translate to the movie, but it's interesting to know that's where it came from.
When I first saw First Blood, I suspected that it was going to read as an allegory for homophobia. He sees this kind of drifter walking through town, looks at this guy, and immediately has this sort of homophobic response to this guy. Thinks he might be a gay man. He's trying to chase the gays out of his town. And I know if you had cast a minority actor in the Rambo role, it would definitely read as a racist
allegory.
Racial allegory, a racist white cop trying to chase the non-whites out of town. As it stands, it becomes a little vague. It's just, why does he hate John Rambo so much? And I understand how the pride begins to mount as the story moves forward, but that initial spark is kind of the interesting theme that needs to be explored, because I'm not exactly sure what they're trying to say with that.
Anyway, so Rambo, or the First Blood was a hit. And it spawned a sequel, and that sequel
it didn't need one.
It didn't need one, but it was a hit, and they made one.
Yeah,
it was called Rambo: First Blood Part 2. First off, Second Blood. This is not an extension of the same blood. No, this is different people drew First Blood.
The notion of First Blood is something that happens in every battle. You can have more than one First Blood.
But it's okay. 2. This isn't part 2 of that same First Blood.
But yeah, Rambo,
this is a different blood.
Rambo: First Blood Part 2, or as it was called in Mad Magazine, Dumbo: More Blood Part 2.
Okay. At the beginning of Rambo: First Blood Part 2, we pick up Rambo has been sent to hard labor, and I understand why.
He's breaking rocks in a cartoon prison.
Yeah. Troutman comes in and just says, "Hey, sorry I couldn't get you out of this before, but I can now because plot." So it turns out, and this is actually
this is so stupid.
There were a ton of American soldiers who were missing in action in Vietnam. And they have new intelligence. That's true. They have new intelligence that says some of these people might still be being held as POWs, and they need Rambo and his expertise and his familiarity with the region to go in, get pictures, prove that the POWs are there or that they're not there, and come back. Easy peasy. Should be an easy job. And the plot is Rambo goes there, finds out the POWs are there, but it turns out that the government didn't actually want to find them because that would have jump-started the Vietnam War again.
Yeah.
And so Rambo gets tortured and then goes insane and wins the Vietnam War.
Yep. Yeah,
that's the thing with Rambo: First Blood Part 2. Rambo was defeated by the Vietnam War in the first movie, and this one he wins it single-handedly.
He gets to go back and win Vietnam. Now, this came in the 1980s. Reagan was in office, and there was this new sort of cultural boosting of the military that had come with Reagan's regime. The fact that we had lost Vietnam was this big touching point, like sticking point in the American military history all of a sudden. There's a joke about it in a fish called Wanda. Yeah. Like, Americans, we're Americans, we win everything. And John Cleese kind of mocks the Kevin Kline character saying, "Oh, really? Winning everything? Like North Vietnam?" He says, "We did not lose Vietnam, it was a tie." It's a really hilarious moment.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, like, losing Vietnam, first of all, it was horrible when it happened anyway. Yeah. But all of a sudden it became something to be kind of ashamed about.
It was wounded masculine pride.
Yeah, this wounded masculine pride. So now we have to kind of get it back. And Rambo: First Blood Part 2 does this completely misguided idea of trying to say that we could do it. We can still do it.
Yeah.
We can go back and we can win Vietnam.
All we need is one good American who won't follow bureaucratic bullshit.
And all of a sudden it becomes this really kind of like sympathetic left-wing stop wars, protect the veterans allegory into this. The veterans are the ones who have the military might, and the governmental bureaucracy is not to be trusted. All we need is a big, strong military man to obliterate a lot of foreigners, and we can win.
And yeah, basically. That's it. The movie is shockingly simple.
Yeah.
Like, there's really no meat on its bones. Rambo gets the assignment. There's almost a joke where they build up, they're going to give him all this crazy new technology. There's this room full of computers with lights that blink out of sequence. Make them blink in sequence! Best joke from Airplane 2. And then he loses them all immediately as he jumps out of the airplane. Like, that's almost a joke right there. The best part of this whole movie for me, by the way. So are they in the Philippines? Is that where they're at the beginning? Where are they at the beginning? They're in Thailand. Yeah. They're in Thailand at the beginning of the movie. And they're on like the border. And it's a secret military base. It's full of all of these like high-tech military stuff, and they go into Charles Napier plays the guy in charge, and they go into his office.
He's not trustworthy because he's played by Charles Napier.
Yeah, Charles Napier is great, by the way. If you know him, if you know him if you saw him. In his office, there's a Coke machine, like you'd have in the break room at work. Like it's just there. And he stops in the middle of the obligatory exposition scene. You know that scene in every action movie from the 80s and 90s where like the tough guy goes into someone's office and then they read a file about the guy right in front of him as if he's not there? Like, type A personality, Green
Rambo
Beret.
Spent time in prison. Why'd you kill that one guy in prison? Do you still have that necklace of human teeth? Whatever it is they got.
It's lazy writing. And in the middle of this, where he's just telling the whole plot, telling him the whole mission, he was just like, get me a Coke. And they get him a Coke out of the machine. It's like the worst product placement I've ever seen in a movie.
And it's really obvious product placement. Yeah, and
it makes no sense.
And even though it's in the villain's office, you can tell that it's kind of folded into this kind of oorah Americana that Rambo Part 2 is trying to.
And it makes no
trying
fucking
to sell.
Transformers is blatant fucking product placement as well. But when a Mountain Dew machine turns into a Transformer at the end of Transformers 1. At least there's a reason for that. Here, it's like you could have just had a cooler, man. You didn't have to put a whole fucking Coke machine. You brought that with you. You realize that. You brought that with you from America.
Right.
That was weapons you couldn't bring because you had to bring a fucking Coke machine. Just bring a 6-pack, for Christ's sake. Moving on.
The rest of the movie is him trekking into dangerous territory, finding the POWs. Charles Napier doesn't want him to know about those POWs, so he murders everyone.
That's it.
And then goes back to Charles Napier and shoots up all those computers.
He befriends a woman over there. She dies tragically, but basically...
what is the actress's name?
I forget.
Julia Nixon, I think is her name.
Yeah, Julia Nixon.
Who I've seen a lot because she's starred in had supporting roles in a lot of crappy movies I've seen. She's been in stuff like Double Dragon.
There you go.
2 different Star Trek series.
But yeah, no, it's basically he goes in, fights some people, comes out, doesn't quite come out, goes back in, gets tortured, fights everybody ever.
Has explosive arrows,
and then
blows up a single guy.
And I love that. That's a great bit. That's a GIF. Everyone knows that GIF.
Second best body exploding scene in movie history. The first being from Death Wish 4.
Oh, I'm going to throw it out. Okay, we're talking about not like psychic exploding, because if it's psychic exploding, we got to go to the Fury.
Well, I guess
that's a different kind of explosion.
Different kind of explosion.
Yeah, because the Scanners and the Fury are like neck and neck with psychic explosions.
With a projectile weapon explosion.
Everyone knows about the scene in Scanners where the dude's head explodes. Not enough people talk about the Fury. Partially because it's not as good as Scanners, but it's still good.
It's filmed from 13 different angles.
There you go.
The explosion is filmed 13 different times.
There's a really spectacular explosion in the psychic teen movie, The Fury. It's pretty epic. You need to see it.
It happens at the end of the movie, but we're going to tell you all about it because that's what makes the film worth seeing.
It's worth it to get to that explosion. It's not bad. It's just not as good as Scanners. Yeah. And then Rambo comes back in and he shoots all the computers forever.
With a machine gun.
It all takes a while.
And then fires it into the air and screams, "Ah!" And no tragedy.
Yeah.
There's no sadness to the fact that he's turned into a killing machine. The deaths are all righteous kills.
Yep.
It turns out that the evil Vietnamese soldiers are also being masterminded by evil communists as well, who look like Nazis. So we got triple trouble here.
Yeah. And, of course, American bureaucrats also suck.
And American bureaucrats also suck.
And Rambo gets to have the moral high ground at the end, and he's won the war, and he has a big speech about we just wanted America to love us as much as we loved America. And it really just kind of reads... You don't get this big dramatic moment after all the silly crap we just watched. This movie feels like it gave birth to Michael Bay. Like, I know Michael Bay is older than Rambo First Blood Part 2, but I can see, like, young Michael Bay seeing this movie and going, that's it. That's my aesthetic. And I'm going to watch this movie every day.
And it's
just pro-military, pro-masculine, pro-violence.
Creepy, violent political underpinnings. Like, this is something like the NRA screens on a regular basis. It's just so pro-murder.
There's a lot of dumb action movies. Like, Commando is way more fun than this. Like, it's really way more entertaining
Commando
than this.
is just brazenly stupid and enjoyable because of
Commando isn't flat out telling you, we have an ethos, and then the ethos is just stupid. And then on top of it, Rambo just isn't that good a movie. Rambo First Blood Part 3, or as they call it, Rambo 3, even though there was never a Rambo
this is the level of intelligence we're dealing with, by the way. The third movie they just call Rambo 3.
Rambo 3.
Nickname, like, I call the second movie Rambo 2. That's not the proper title, but you know what I'm talking about.
We all know it's Rambo 2.
Colloquially, you can call it Rambo 3 if you like. But to actually give it the title of Rambo 3 is so stupid.
It's really annoying.
The intelligence is even lower this time. Even less happens. And nothing happens with the character whatsoever.
I will say this. Well, no, because I think there's a reason. Here's the damnedest thing. So the first movie was about what happens after Rambo loses the Vietnam War. The second movie is about what happens when Rambo wins the Vietnam War for America. The third movie is about what happens when Rambo wins the Vietnam War for the Vietnamese. Because it's about Rambo going into Afghanistan when the Mujahideen were fighting communist Russia. And Troutman has a big speech about how this is your Vietnam, Russia. You're fighting a war you can't win with people who you cannot win over. This is their territory. You're never going to dig them out. You should never go into Afghanistan. This movie plays really weird. This movie plays really, really weird when you look at it from...
Fast forward to 2003.
It's really weird. Retrospect is all over the place in this movie. But, like, so this is Rambo teaming up with...
the Taliban.
The Mujahideen isn't exactly the Taliban, but, like, it's... Call it what you will. He teams up with the people who, in this metaphor, are the Vietnamese in the Vietnam War, and he wins that too. What the hell?
And it really
so
is
weird.
Richard Crenna just says, "Go in there, help the Afghanis, defeat the Russians," and so he does. That's it.
Well, if he says that, and then he says, "No, I'm helping monks build things," and then Richard Crenna goes off on his own, and he gets kidnapped, and he has to go in and save Richard Crenna. There's a little bit more. So there's actually like this emotional thing because he does have a genuine relationship. I would love for there to have been a scene that's just Rambo and Troutman talking, not about plot, not about, because half of Troutman's dialogue is about how,
here's your mission, you need to go in there.
Half of his dialogue is, here's your mission, and half of his dialogue throughout this whole franchise is Rambo is God's special angel. Like,
pretty much.
God would have mercy on you, Rambo won't. Like, that kind of shit. And Richard Crenna is a better actor than that. Like, he deserves better than that. So he goes in to say Richard Crenna, he teams up with the Mujahideen, and then it's just action. Now, I'll say this. The action is better presented than Rambo First Blood Part 2.
In terms of, like, choreography and photography,
there's some really cool stuff. There's, like, these cool helicopter chases and Rambo shooting them out of the air. There was one of the most...
They come out of nowhere, too. There's a scene where, like, Richard Crenna's in prison. He's looking really sad. And just all of a sudden, there are two helicopters just soaring, like, big ones right by all the actors. It's a really great stunt.
There's this... One of the most epic deaths I've ever seen in an action movie. Now, the most epic death of any action movie is the bad guy's death at the end of Double Team.
where he is exploded and eaten by a tiger simultaneously.
No, you're underselling it. He's in the Colosseum.
In the Roman Colosseum.
He's in the Colosseum, standing on a landmine while a tiger jumps at him. So he takes his foot off the landmine as the tiger hits him. So they both explode. And then the explosion pushes Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dennis Rodman out of the Coliseum while they hide behind Coke machines.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
You know what? That's how I want to go.
That's a good way to go.
I want to have to step off a landmine to avoid a tiger in the Coliseum.
Rambo in this movie is a really good one. He he does that old action movie trick where he pulls the pin out of your hand grenade that's like stuck to your vest. He pulls that out, roundhouse kicks a guy in the face, wraps a rope around his neck, so when he falls into a cave, suspended like 60 feet over the ground in the cave. His neck snaps and then he blows up. That's neat. I'm just going to say that's neat.
Those poor Vietnam veterans.
This is where we've gone from First Blood. This is
just 2 movies later, and we have this violent insanity. It feels like a canon movie.
Yes, it does.
It feels like something
the
Chuck
middle
Norris.
two feel like
the middle two both feel like canon movies. They're not, but they.
If you don't know canon. Canon was a movie production company that mostly produced movies in the 80s.
If you don't know Canon, you poor thing.
Canon, reliably produced some of the schlockiest...
The best schlock that came out of the 1980s.
Like stuff like Delta Force. Yeah. Like stuff that was like kind of self-important, but also total crap. Like just pretty much... They made a few art house movies by good directors just to kind of up their cred. But seriously, you could pick any Canon movie at random and you're going to find a schlocky... weird but hypnotic piece of entertainment.
They did the Death Wish sequels.
Yeah.
Like 3, 4, and 5 I think were all canon.
That's actually, you know what, that's another one where like from the first movie to the second movie, tonal whiplash.
Yeah.
You're right. Death Wish is the other one of those probably. So Rambo 3, not much to it. I find it more entertaining than Rambo 2. I'd say if you like action movies, it's kind of worth watching, but it's not good.
A lot of the iconic stuff about Rambo came from Rambo 3. Like,
I'm your worst nightmare.
I'm your worst nightmare. The scene where he gets shot through the hip and like pours, like it goes all the way through his body. He has to fill his entire wound with gunpowder and then sets it alight and flames shoot out of his hip. It's
really cool. The scene where he's a stick fighter at the beginning.
Yeah.
He's at they find him and he's like street fighting for cash. And what's really weird, I'd never noticed it before, and I'm watching this with my wife Michelle, and she's just like, wait a minute, his manager is Mickey from Rocky.
He has the same knit cap. Yeah, I didn't notice that either.
He really does. And he's got like these chomping on a cigar. Rock, good work with the sticks. It's Rambo this time. Yeah. So then fast forward
to 2008.
2008. Now, there have been many attempts to do a Rambo movie in the interim. I'd heard one where it was going to be like a Die Hard situation at the UN. There was one rumor that they were going to do like a Rambo movie where he was fighting like an alien. That would have been something.
You know what?
Why not?
At the point we were left with Rambo 3, why not? It would have made just as much sense.
Sylvester Stallone came back and directed.
The first one he directed.
The first movie in the series he's directed. He had like
not the first film he directed.
No. It was the first like non-Rambo movie he directed in like decades. And he directed actually I think a pretty good sequel called Rambo now. So
just Rambo, because we haven't had that yet. And this feels more like a direct sequel to First Blood.
This feels like you can skip the middle two. Like the middle two are like what Rambo dreams about.
Yeah.
Like when he's having a good dream. Like that's
like how actually winning. Yeah.
That's how I look at those. Like they're like the fantasy of how Rambo wanted things to go. But what actually happened was First Blood and then Rambo 2008.
And Rambo 2008 came out at a time, it came out in 2008. This was after there was all of these huge quagmires that had been going on in the Middle East for a long time. A new generation of soldiers had come and gone. A new generation of veterans had come. And this was all televised. It was really hotly contested. It was a political bugaboo. It was a losing battle. It was badly strategized. These were not popular wars. And bringing back Rambo in this context, you have to do something tragic with the character.
You have to go back to the original version.
You can't have him go to Baghdad and just blow everybody up and say, "Hey, I won." It doesn't work that way anymore.
I mean, you could have, but it would have sucked. It would have been lame.
It would have been just morally irresponsible. It just would have been horrible.
So credit where credit is due. They tried to do a serious Rambo movie, and I think it's simplistic, but I think it works. Rambo is working. He's in Burma. Or just on the outside of Burma. I think he's in Malaysia or something.
He has to go into Burma.
He has a boat and he catches snakes for people who need snakes
for like
shows.
Snake handlers and snake shows. Yeah.
He catches cobras. It's a tough job, but he likes doing it.
Keeps him out of the public eye.
He's good.
This is where I picture Rambo would be.
Yeah, I buy this. Just living on the edge of society. just wants to be as alone as possible. He knows like all these tough things and he can make a living at it, but he's not like he doesn't have roommates.
Doesn't want to get involved.
Doesn't have a family.
Anything.
This is it. And I get it. And Stallone gives a pretty good performance here as a guy whose look says "do not touch." The guy, he's got to be like,
looks damaged.
I'm trying to remember how old he was. He was like at least in his late 50s, early 60s at this point, and he's huge. Like he's a huge muscle of a man, and he just has this look where he's just like, you know what? I'm going to talk to someone else. Like that's what you would get from Rambo at this point.
Like like there's a lot of movies where it's like, oh, he's over there in the corner and like in a bar and he's drinking whiskey. Rambo wouldn't even go into the bar. He'd go home and he'd drink milk because he just needs to nourish himself. That's it. He's not going to even go to any place where he would remotely socialize with people.
Rambo is hired by Christian missionaries who are going into Burma. Burma is the site of a horrible war,
horrific
at this point.
Civil war. Yeah.
Massacres, really. And they ask Rambo, you know the area, would you please take us upriver? And Rambo's like, no, because you're going to die. It's terrible. And then Julie Benz, an actor I really like, she's Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Dexter, she gives Rambo a good argument. She just, entreats his better nature and just says, we're trying to do the right thing. Please let us. We're making these decisions. And he's finally like, all right, fine.
It's your decision, yeah.
Rambo takes him to the river, ends up having to kill a bunch of people to save their lives, and they hate him for it.
They say, we'll let you through, but like you have to give us a couple people so we can use them as slaves. Yeah. It's like, no, we're not going to do that. Well, then we'll murder you. And then he just kills them all.
Rambo kills all those guys, and the Christians are very disappointed in him. And then he leaves them just feeling bad about himself. And then the village they're helping is attacked. Julie Benz and the guy who plays the boyfriend, who I forget.
It's not just attacked. It is like mercilessly pillaged and destroyed.
If Paul Verhoeven's Squibs ever directed a movie, it would be Rambo 2008. This is one of the most punishingly violent action movies I've ever seen, and I mean that in a good way.
It's like this side of RoboCop. Like you get to see people's bodies just... I'll use the word again, just completely obliterated, like reduced to viscera.
It's really fascinating because if you think about it, there's a lot of this movie that is, again, Rambo just killing like 100 guys. And yet the violence is so horrifically violent that it doesn't really feel celebrated.
It's not fun. It's not being celebrated.
Yeah,
it's not being enjoyed.
We see limbs being chopped off by bullets. And there's a guy with a sniper rifle who like hits someone and they fly across the room while you see the chunk of their body. Like, it's just like, dear God.
There's a scene in this movie where the Burmese have a machine gun mounted on the back of a Jeep. It's a giant machine gun that they use to just strafe villages and murder hundreds. Rambo gets on the back, turns it toward the driver, and turns him into jam. It's awful.
It's awful, but it's incredible to watch. The movie, I think, at least has an appreciation that violence is fucking horrible.
Yeah.
Here, we're doing it for a reason, but it's fucking horrible, and I at least appreciate that.
And because the violence is so horrible, there's no way we can appreciate what Rambo is doing as heroic.
Not truly heroic. He's trying to save people, but
he's trying to save people, but
this isn't saintly behavior.
No, he's not doing any kind of righteous thing. He doesn't feel like he's doing anything righteous. And whenever somebody tries to express any note of mercy, they are either murdered or kidnapped or threatened. And we get to see this very kind of Lars von Trier version of the world where mercy is a disease. And the most horrific violence possible is the only cure.
Paul Schultz plays the male missionary I was talking about. Yeah. And he goes on a journey where by the end of it, he's like, it's fight or die. And he ends up becoming just as violent as well. And I think the movie is making a point that when you're in war, you'll do what you have to do. Everyone is pretty close to being Rambo under certain situations, and that's sad, isn't it?
War turns you into a monster. Yeah. It's, you look at something like Rambo 2 and Rambo 3 are like egregiously pro-war. They just cry out for violence. You're supposed to cheer when that guy blows up. This is just like First Blood, stringently anti-war, and shows not just a kind of personal, emotional tragedy, but the way it has eaten away at the soul of mankind. That war has eroded civilization to this point where we can just be reduced to nothing but parts, and children can be thrown into fire, and that's kind of just par for the course for what war is. And I think that is an actually much more responsible message.
Yeah. I like Rambo 2008.
Yeah.
I think Rambo 2008 it's simplistic. I think it's hard to deny that. There's not much to it, really. But it's effective at what it does.
Like crazy, but yeah.
It's effective at what it does. And I think it's a really good movie in and of itself. I think First Blood is great. I'm a big fan of First Blood. 2 and 3. 2, I'm sorry. 2 makes me sleepy. 2 is so... It's just a big testicle of a movie. Like, there's just nothing to it. 3, it's well crafted enough technically that I can enjoy watching it, even though it's just kind of stupid. Yeah, Rambo's pretty good. I like Rambo.
I think a lot of critics responded negatively to it at the time, and I think it was because it took place it was made in 2008, and because it took place in Burma, it was very clearly trying to eschew anything directly political to do with the wars in the Middle East. We were having a conversation about this, and you brought up a great idea. After the events of Rambo III, what if he went back to Afghanistan and had to fight the very people he helped in the last installment of the movie?
That's one thing he could have done.
Yeah, and that would have addressed the maybe not the irresponsible, but kind of the dated politics of Rambo III. And brought it into the modern age and said something really kind of salient and political about what Rambo represents in 2008.
You could have done that. I will say this. I think it's actually really... I can't go along with the... I don't remember. I'm trying to remember if I ever argued this. If I did, I was wrong. I think to argue that because Rambo 2008 is set in Burma, it was somehow, like, oh, why isn't it in Afghanistan? Why are you eschewing the real politics? The tragedy in Burma was real too.
That's true.
And by making a point that, listen, everyone's talking about Afghanistan, everyone's talking about that. People aren't talking about Burma. Horrible things are happening in Burma. And that's still political. It's a different kind of politics. Might not be what people want to talk about right now. It's still real, though. And I give him some credit for that.
For bringing it into the conversation, or at least attempting to bring it into the conversation, is definitely admirable. But... yeah, because America wasn't involved in Burma, that could be the message there. Yeah. This horrible thing is going on, and we're not looking at it or thinking about it.
Yeah,
we're only concerned about our own politics. So there's two different approaches to this, and I understand the criticism, both sides of it.
Yeah. Okay, Rambo. Weird franchise.
Totally weird.
Very weird. Watch them all in like a weekend. It's very weird.
Stronger the sadder it is.
Yeah. When it's emotionally honest, it's really great. When it's propaganda, it's great.
When it's happy and rousing, it's propaganda.
Yeah, and not good propaganda either. Just lame propaganda.
Propaganda can be exhilarating, but it's still propaganda.
Yeah. You can appreciate that this propaganda may be well made. Still simplistic and possibly irresponsible. We need to talk about it. And this isn't even good propaganda, so you can't even say that much about it. So that's it for the Critically Acclaimed podcast. Whitney has to go to work.
Yeah,
so we do not have any time for any letters. We will make up for that next week.
We will.
Next week, we will be reviewing the new releases, Action Point, Adrift, and Upgrade. We will also be reviewing a notoriously bad movie of your choice. Maybe it actually is bad, maybe not, but it's notorious. And you can vote for that movie at the Schmoville Facebook page. That's Schmoville with an exclamation point. And your options are, because Action Point is coming out, we thought this would be kind of fun. Your options are all movies based on amusement park rides. So your options are Country Bears, which was about country bears.
Don't choose Country Bears.
The Haunted Mansion with Eddie Murphy.
No, don't choose that one either.
Or Mission to Mars.
Oh, God.
The one about the mission to Mars. These are all notoriously bad movies. I've actually never seen any of them.
I've seen 2 of the 3.
I've seen part of Haunted Mansion.
You know who made Mission to Mars?
Brian De Palma.
Brian De Palma made Mission to Mars! What the hell is wrong with you?
You've made good movies! We just reviewed one. But he's also made some real crap. He's made some real crap.
He's about 50-50, that guy.
Interesting filmography. Right. So those are your options. Head over to the Schmoville fan page to vote for that. We will review that, and we'll pair it with a good movie of our choosing to sort of bring out the best in one and the worst of the other. And also, don't forget to head over to criticallyacclaimed.net where we have our new exclusive content and also links to all of our other content throughout the web if you just want to get it all in one place.
We both have original reviews on that site.
Yes, we do. And there's more to come. I'm going to put out new content, maybe not every day, but several pieces every week.
Yeah.
And also head over to patreon.com/canceledtoosoon, where we have a new updated tier system, and one of them allows you to make us write articles for criticallyacclaimed.net of your choice. You can tell us what to write, and we will write it for you. And also, there are bonus podcasts there, including one where we review every single nominee for Best Picture ever, in order. That's coming up, new episode's coming up later this week.
Yep.
So, that's what's going on. We're on Twitter. I'm at William Bibbiani.
I'm at Witney Seibold.
Again, Cancel Too Soon. We have a new episode with Sam Levine talking about the sitcom he was a part of. Not Freaks and Geeks. Selfie. Talking about Selfie. Next week, we're talking about Freaks and Geeks. So that's going to come up
Sam Levine will return, schedule permitting.
Yes, we're trying to make sure that works. But he's a busy guy. Polishing all those belts. I guess that's about it.
That's about it.
So, even though we didn't read any letters, you can email us at criticallyacclaimed.net.
That's our new email address.
That's our new email address. If you can also send the letters to the old email address, we'll still get them. But new email address from here on out, letters@criticallyacclaimed.net. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And we'll never forget, everyone's a critic.
I want to go to the midnight show. I'm sorry, what?